Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister, and also thank you for your very convincing and inspiring speech, and I would compliment you for especially raising the issues related to gender equality, and the situation for women and girls around the world, and that you will make this also an important part of your G7 presidency, I understand?
Yes, very much. Over the past number of years in forums like these, there's been a recognition that we're facing real challenges around global growth, although it is turning around somewhat. But as we look for where those next elements of growth, and that's going to be central to the G7.
So how are you going to use your G7 presidency to also make sure that we will get more inclusive and job creating and sustainable globalization, a more fair world, as you mentioned?
Well, the G7 is made up of nations that have different ideologies in their governments at certain moments, but share a broad set of values and approaches as developed economies. We are countries that understand that making sure that growth helps everyone is something that all of us in various ways as G7 leaders got elected on. There's all sorts of different approaches to try and do it, but my approach, the Canadian way, is always to try and find common ground, find the ways in which we can agree that boosting women's participation in the workforce, which has been universally supported by all G7 nations as a major theme this year, as a way to help ordinary citizens, to help people grow their opportunities, is something that we will always work to challenge and push to go further. But I'm looking forward to finding a lot of common ground.
Prime Minister, you also had some news for us. At the beginning of your speech, you let us know that you successfully finished the TPP trade deal, Asia and Canada. I believe this can be very consequential, especially based on what you said. Could you say 2 words about what you think this TPP deal that you just signed can mean for jobs, but also for opportunities for growth moving forward? Because there are some skepticism related to how job creating these deals are.
Well, I mean, we're seeing a lot of trade skepticism around the world in general right now. People are worried or increasingly have become convinced that trade deals benefit the few, not the many. Benefit a country's bottom line, benefit multinationals, but don't benefit ordinary workers. And there have been examples of that in the past. And the challenge that Canada, fundamentally as both a progressive and a trading nation, has faced is how do we put those two things together? And our first big challenge when we came into office, it was very much on my mind last time I was here 2 years ago, was moving forward that we knew we had to tweak. And there were difficult negotiations. I think a number of people remember the challenges we all faced in Vietnam. But we knew that if we're going to move forward on a trade deal, we have to demonstrate convincingly that it's in the best interests of our citizens and that it can really be a win-win-win for all partners. That's what we're working very hard on in NAFTA, and I know that the work we were able to do with our fellow CPTPP partners in getting to this point is going to be good, not just for Canadians, but for citizens of the entire group of 11 countries in Asia that are part of this. I mean, this is an example of the pushback against globalization and anti-trade and closing off, that you can move forward, but you need to include the things that citizens care about if they're going to get support for trade. And it's not easy. It would have been easier for us to just say, okay, fine, trade is important, we'll sign in and we'll try and figure it out later. But if we're going to push back against the anti-trade tendency in globalization that will leave us all worse off, we have to put the concerns and the well-being of our ordinary citizens at the center of what we are negotiating. And that's what all 11 of us have been able to do with the CPTPP.
Yeah, you're very convincing. Do you think it's such a good deal that you can later on see your neighbor in the south also joining?
We're working very hard to make sure that our neighbor to the south recognizes how good NAFTA is, and that it has benefited not just our economy, but his economy and the world's economy. But we're also very much open to more trade deals involving more people, as long as it's in the best benefit of all of our citizens.
Last question, Prime Minister. It's no 2 years almost since you were in Davos. You had been Prime Minister for a couple of months. No, you have had this big responsibility for 2 years. What has surprised you most in this job? And with experience now after 2 years, what is your main aspiration moving forward?
Well, I'm sort of pleased to be at this point where I look back at the speech I gave 2 months into being Prime Minister here at Davos. That was filled with lofty progressive ideals and how we need to challenge ourselves, and be able to come back 2 years later and say, well, those lofty progressive ideals we put 40 days still, but having more specific examples to point to share our success and to perhaps encourage or inspire other folks in this room, and as corporate leaders or as political leaders, to look at what's been going on in Canada and take that on. I'm feeling confident that we're definitely onto something here in Canada, and I've got a great team working hard on delivering it. And the more we can work together, not just as a country, but as a world, on the kinds of things that really, really will matter to our kids and grandkids, the better off we'll all be.
Merci bien. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for the upcoming session.